Hi there, welcome to No Nonsense Whisky. My name's Vin PF, and today on the channel we've got something what I would call rather special. Now, on No Nonsense Whisky, I tend to cover anything that's kind of related to whisky, maybe even branching out into other distilled spirits such as like rums and cognacs and things like that, if I can get hold of them. But the focus really is whisky. The important differentiation there is that I'm not saying one specific kind of whisky. I'm not saying bourbon, I'm not saying scotch. If it's world whisky, I'm happy as long as it's whisky, pretty much. Today we've got a little bit of Norwegian whisky. Now, I've covered some Norwegian whisky on the channel in the past. I'm lucky in the respect that my brother-in-law and his partner live out in Norway, so I've got access to quite a lot of these new distilleries that are popping up in Norway because they're able to get hold of them for me and bring them over. Unfortunately, this one is only available in Norway right now. They did have some available in travel retail. This one, I'm not even sure where you would go to get this because the rules in Norway regarding liquor are a little bit different. You have to go to very specific shops. It's a little bit like the Canadian model in some states, in some provinces, where you have a government-controlled liquor store that you must go to pick up stuff like this. Anyway, you might be able to get it from the distillery. I don't know that for sure, though. Someone will be able to correct me on that. I've got some fans and some viewers in Norway who hopefully will know about this and will be able to try it. In any case, I apologise to anyone from Norway or who can speak Norwegian about the kind of craziness I'm going to say about the pronunciations and stuff here. I do have a little bit of a guide on it, but I'm nowhere near a native, so I'll probably get it wrong. Apologies in advance. So today we have, as it says here, Norsk Whisky, and I believe this is pronounced Gjoleid, might be Gjoleid, not sure. And if you can just about see it, been washed out a little bit, there we go. It says Praksis 1.2. This isn't the first release by them. They've had a 1.1 and they've had a prelude before that, and they've had something after this. Hopefully this is still around. This sells in Norway for about 650 Norwegian kroner, which roughly speaking is divided by 10, so it's about that kind of £65 mark for a half-litre bottle. It is expensive whisky, but as we know from my coverage of English whisky, these kind of newer distilleries are not putting out the same volume as the big boys in Scotland, so it costs a little bit more to get this stuff out, so it ends up coming towards us. But of course, the taxes and just generally things are more expensive in Norway anyway. If you spent any time there, I had the pleasure of spending a week over there a couple of years ago now, and while it's not as expensive as everyone makes out, generally speaking, most things are a little bit more expensive. Anyway, back to the whiskey itself. Now, as you can tell, maybe not again because of the washout, there's a lot of Norwegian on here. Luckily, I've had most of this translated. And generally speaking, it's not that hard to differentiate. If you know what you're looking for in whiskies, if you spent enough time looking at whiskey labels, you might be able to work out what some of this means anyway. Now on here, something which I find quite funny, it says Nesten 5 I'm probably saying that wrong again, which I believe means nearly 5 years. So this is a 4-year-old whiskey, nearly 5 years old. The cool thing about this is it's actually a mixture of 2 different barrels. We've got a virgin American oak and we have a first fill ex-bourbon American oak. Interesting stuff. They've also done a little bit of experimentation on the kind of grain that they put in. Obviously, if you're a Scotch drinker, you'll be mostly attuned to malted barley if you're having your single malt whiskies. If you're having your blends, then you're probably going to get a few more cereals in there anyway. But if you're a bourbon drinker, then you're used to having loads of different grains chucked in a different mash bill. This is kind of what we've got over here. I don't know the different proportions of those grains, but what I can tell you is that they have a proportion of lightly malted barley, which I think is a bit of an interesting one. They've got some malted wheat, which is, again, very interesting. And then they have some lightly smoked malted barley. Now, there's some other information on here as well. It goes into telling us how much alcohol it was distilled to and the temperatures that various things happened at. But we won't go into that too much. You can have a look on their website if you're interested in more stuff to do with that. Personally, I'm more interested in the flavour and what it's like and if the value is okay. Although, I have to say today, that's a little bit skewed because I can't really compare it to anything else that I've tried before because the markets are different, etc. So take that with a pinch of salt. Let's get into the whiskey and see what we've got. Now, it doesn't actually say natural colour on there, but I am given to believe it is, and it's probably true. If you know anything about your bourbons, you know, especially in the kind of American climate, I know you can get a good colour in 4 years. We're talking about the Norwegian climate, which is very different from summer to winter, and it's still a good colour. Still a good colour. Probably better to show you that, to be fair. Still a good colour. Onto the nose then. Whoa, okay, so it's very, very, very flavourful. It's a lot of vanillas, bags of those kind of oaky tannins, leathery notes going on. For me, there's a touch of cherry in there as well. And oddly, it reminds me a little bit of kind of like a cola sort of flavour, like a, dare I say, Coca-Cola, but something like that, you know, whatever brand is the nearest one to you. Kind of a cola-y looking vibe on it. Let's go for the palate. Oh, big bold flavours. Again, more vanillas, more oak, really oaky. Surprisingly oaky, I have to say, for that many years in a relatively cool climate. Now, what doesn't translate over from the nose is those kind of cherry and cola flavours, in my opinion, but it's replaced with these kind of gingery, cinnamony spice kind of flavours, which is really interesting. Really like that kind of thing. Finish is quite long, actually. It's a medium long kind of length, but it's very spicy, very cinnamon driven as well. Really tasty stuff. Now, here's the cool thing about this. If I plucked this into a blind tasting with a bunch of scotch, you would probably be forgiven for thinking it's some kind of bourbon, American whiskey, that kind of thing. Very interesting flavour profiles. It's kind of like bourbon, but you know, if you held it up next to a bourbon, I'm sure it wouldn't taste quite the same. Very interesting indeed. I think this would confuse a lot of people if you put it in a blind tasting situation, and I think I might do that. I might squeeze it in. I don't have much of it. It's only a half litre, but I'm willing to put it into blind tasting sets if necessary, just to see how it gets on. Because personally, I think it's brilliant. Really nice, bold flavours, good ABV, good kind of oak, spicy led flavours that I'm kind of really into at the minute. This is a big thing for me. I know it might be a bit too much for kind of the standards kind of Speyside drinker. If you're into those kind of really light, delicate flavours that kind of you want to spend some time with and pick apart, you're not going to get that with this. This is very bold and but for me, really good.